My name is Lucas. I'm 28 years old and I work as a freelance photographer. For as long as I can remember, I've been fascinated by abandoned places and the stories they hold. There's something eerily beautiful about places left behind, forgotten by time. So when I heard about the Silvera house on the outskirts of our town, I couldn't resist the temptation to explore it. The house had a dark history, one shrouded in mystery and tragedy. Over 50 years ago, the entire Silvera family disappeared without a trace, leaving the house to decay. Rumors circulated about ghostly sightings and unexplained events, but no one had been brave enough to stay there for long. The Silvera house stood alone at the end of a long, overgrown driveway, hidden behind a thicket of ancient trees. Its facade was a grim reminder of better days, with peeling paint and broken windows that gave it a haunting, skeletal appearance. The air around the house felt heavy, almost oppressive, as if the very ground was soaked with sorrow. I parked my car at the edge of the property, the setting sun casting long shadows that seemed to dance across the decrepit walls. Despite the stories, I was more excited than scared. Armed with my camera and a sturdy flashlight, I approached the front door, its wood splintered and weathered by decades of neglect. The moment I stepped onto the porch, I felt a chill run down my spine, a subtle warning that perhaps I should turn back. But curiosity got the better of me. With a deep breath, I pushed open the door and stepped into the darkness of the Silvera house, ready to uncover its secrets. My visit to the Silvera house wasn't just about satisfying my curiosity, it was also part of a personal project. I was working on a photo series titled Forgotten Echoes, aiming to capture the haunting beauty of abandoned places. Each location had its own story, and the Silvera house, with its tragic past, promised to be a poignant addition. I planned to spend the night there, documenting the house in the eerie light of dusk and the stillness of night. Despite the unsettling rumors, I reassured myself that the stories were just that, stories. As I stepped into the grand foyer, the air inside the house felt noticeably colder, a stark contrast to the mild evening outside. My footsteps echoed through the empty halls, each creak of the wooden floorboards amplifying the silence. Dust motes danced in the beam of my flashlight, creating a ghostly shimmer. The house smelled of mildew and age, the scent of forgotten memories. I set up my equipment in the living room, a once elegant space now overtaken by decay. Faded wallpaper peeled from the walls, and a grand piano stood solemnly in the corner, its keys yellowed and broken. It wasn't long before I noticed the first signs of something unusual. As I adjusted my camera settings, I heard a soft, almost imperceptible whisper. At first I dismissed it as the wind, but the windows were sealed shut. The whisper grew louder, more distinct, as if someone were trying to speak to me from the shadows. I paused, listening intently, but the sound faded away, leaving only the creaking of the house. I brushed it off as my imagination running wild and continued my work, but a sense of unease settled in the back of my mind. Moving through the house, I began to feel a strange sensation, as if I were being watched. The hairs on the back of my neck stood on end, and a cold sweat broke out on my forehead. In one of the upstairs bedrooms, I found an old tattered doll lying on the floor, its glass eyes staring blankly at the ceiling. As I bent down to photograph it, I heard what sounded like a child's giggle, faint but unmistakable. My heart raced, and I spun around, flashlight cutting through the darkness, but the hallway was empty. The most chilling moment came when I entered the master bedroom. The air was thick, almost suffocating, and the room felt unnaturally cold. As I photographed the old canopy bed, I noticed a figure in the corner of the room reflected in the mirror. It was a fleeting glimpse, just a shadowy outline, but it was enough to send a jolt of terror through me. I turned quickly, but there was nothing there. The sense of dread was overwhelming, and I decided it was time to take a break and regroup. I headed back to the living room, my mind racing with the strange occurrences. This was just the beginning, and I had the uneasy feeling that the worst was yet to come. As the night deepened, the unsettling phenomena intensified. Sitting in the living room, reviewing the photos I'd taken, I heard a sudden loud bang from upstairs. My heart skipped a beat, and I hesitated before deciding to investigate. As I climbed the creaky staircase, each step seemed to echo louder than the last. When I reached the top, I saw the source of the noise. The door to one of the bedrooms had slammed shut with a force that rattled the walls. Gathering my courage, I slowly approached and opened the door, revealing an empty room. The windows were still sealed, and there was no sign of what could have caused the door to slam shut. Back downstairs, I started to notice objects moving on their own. A chair in the dining room had shifted position, now facing away from the table. As I stood there, trying to rationalize what I was seeing, the temperature in the room plummeted. My breath fogged in front of me, and I could feel an icy draft, despite all the windows being closed. Suddenly, a portrait hanging on the wall swung violently, as if struck by an unseen hand, and crashed to the floor. The sound was deafening in the silence of the house, and I felt a cold dread settle over me. Whatever was in this house was making its presence known. The shadows in the house seemed to take on a life of their own. As I moved from room to room, I caught fleeting glimpses of dark figures out of the corner of my eye. They seemed to flicker and dance just beyond the reach of my flashlight. In the kitchen, I saw a dark silhouette standing by the doorway, watching me. When I turned to confront it, the figure melted into the shadows, leaving me with a deep sense of unease. The whispers returned, more insistent now, as if a chorus of voices were trying to communicate with me from beyond the grave. In a desperate attempt to make sense of the haunting, I dug deeper into the history of the Silvera house. In the basement, hidden beneath a loose floorboard, I found an old journal belonging to Maria Silvera, the matriarch of the family. The entries revealed a heartbreaking tale of loss and sorrow. Maria wrote about her youngest daughter, Anna, who had tragically died in a fire that consumed her bedroom. Consumed by grief, Maria had tried to contact Anna's spirit through seances and rituals, but instead she had unwittingly invited something malevolent into their home. The family had been tormented by dark forces ever since, leading to their mysterious disappearance. As I read the final, desperate entries in Maria's journal, I felt a cold hand grip my shoulder. I turned around slowly, half expecting to see a ghostly figure, but there was nothing there. The house seemed to pulse with a sinister energy, and I realized that Anna's spirit was still trapped here, along with something far more evil. The air grew thick with a palpable sense of dread, and I knew that my presence had disturbed whatever lay dormant in the shadows. It was no longer just a haunted house. It was a battleground of restless spirits and dark forces beyond comprehension. The tension in the house reached its breaking point when I decided to spend some time in Anna's old bedroom, hoping to capture evidence of the paranormal activity. The room was eerily preserved, as if waiting for her return. Toys were scattered on the floor, and a small bed sat against the far wall, its blankets undisturbed for decades. As I set up my camera, the temperature dropped sharply, and a sense of foreboding washed over me. Suddenly, the room was filled with an overwhelming sadness, as if the very walls wept with the memory of the tragedy. Then, out of the corner of my eye, I saw her. Anna's ghostly figure stood by the window, her eyes filled with a haunting mix of innocence and sorrow. She looked as she did in the photos I had seen, a young girl with long dark hair, wearing a simple white dress. She seemed almost solid, but there was a translucence to her form, a reminder that she was no longer of this world. She didn't speak, but her eyes conveyed a desperate plea for help. My heart pounded as I reached out, not sure what to expect. Anna's form flickered, and then slowly began to fade, her eyes never leaving mine. In that moment, I understood the weight of her pain and the darkness that had claimed this house. The encounter was brief, but it left an indelible mark on my soul, a haunting reminder of the lives lost to the shadows. The encounter with Anna's ghost left me shaken to my core, but I knew I couldn't stay in that house any longer. With trembling hands, I packed up my camera and flashlight, moving as quickly as I could without giving in to the urge to run. The oppressive atmosphere seemed to grow heavier with each passing moment, and the whispers that had once been distant now seemed to follow me, growing louder and more insistent. As I reached the front door, it took all my strength to turn the handle and step out into the cold night air. Once outside, I practically ran to my car, heart pounding in my chest. The physical toll of the experience was evident. My muscles ached, my skin was clammy, and I felt an overwhelming exhaustion. But the emotional impact was far deeper. The image of Anna's sorrowful eyes haunted me, and I couldn't shake the feeling of profound sadness and guilt. I had gone in search of a story, but I left with the weight of a tragic history on my shoulders. As I drove away from the Silvera house, I knew that some experiences leave marks that never truly heal. The ghosts of the past had reached out to me, and their story would be one I would never forget. In the weeks that followed, I couldn't escape the lingering effects of that night. Sleep was elusive, haunted by dreams of Anna and the dark presence in the house. Every creak and whisper in my own home sent chills down my spine, a constant reminder of the Silvera house. I shared my story with a few close friends, but most were skeptical, dismissing it as an overactive imagination. Yet I knew what I had seen and felt.
The Holloway Mansion. Its name echoed through the town like a haunting refrain, whispered in hushed tones by those who dared speak of it. Legends swirled around its crumbling walls, tales of restless spirits and unspeakable horrors lurking within its shadows. For us, a group of thrill-seekers hungry for adventure, the mansion represented the ultimate challenge, a chance to confront our deepest fears head-on. As dusk settled over the horizon, painting the sky in hues of crimson and gold, we found ourselves drawn to the mansion like moths to a flame. The overgrown grounds stretched out before us, a tangled labyrinth of thorns and brambles, concealing the secrets of centuries past. Standing at the threshold of the mansion, its looming silhouette cast against the dying light, a sense of unease washed over us. The air was heavy with the scent of decay, and a palpable sense of foreboding hung in the air. But despite the creeping tendrils of fear that threatened to ensnare us, we pressed forward, fueled by a potent mixture of excitement and apprehension. With each step we took towards the mansion, the weight of its history bore down upon us like a leaden cloak. We could feel the eyes of the past watching us, their silent whispers echoing in the stillness of the night. Little did we know, we were about to embark on a journey that would test the limits of our courage and sanity, plunging us into a world of darkness from which there would be no escape. As we gathered at the edge of the mansion's grounds, a sense of anticipation hung thick in the air, mingling with the scent of damp earth and decay. Our breaths came out in shallow puffs of mist, our hearts pounding in our chests as we exchanged nervous glances. Despite the chill that crept into our bones, the thrill of the unknown propelled us forward. Jake, our de facto leader, stood at the forefront, his expression a mix of excitement and determination. With a map in hand and a flashlight clenched tightly in his grasp, he outlined our plan of attack. Each step was meticulously plotted, each route calculated to maximize our chances of uncovering the mansion's secrets. Emily, ever the skeptic, voiced her concerns, her voice trembling slightly as she spoke. Her eyes darted nervously to the looming mansion, its darkened windows like vacant eyes staring back at us. But her doubts were quickly dismissed by the rest of the group, our eagerness blinding us to the dangers that lay ahead. As we made our final preparations, the tension in the air grew palpable, a thick blanket of unease settling over us like a shroud. The wind whispered through the trees, carrying with it the faintest echo of distant voices, a harbinger of the horrors that awaited us within the mansion's walls. With one last glance at each other, we took a collective breath and stepped forward, our footsteps echoing loudly in the silence of the night. The mansion loomed before us, a dark and imposing presence that seemed to swallow us whole. And as we crossed the threshold into the unknown, we knew that there would be no turning back. As heavy wooden doors creaked open, we stepped cautiously into the foyer, our flashlights cutting through the thick veil of darkness that shrouded the interior. The air was stale and musty, filled with the scent of decay and neglect. A shiver ran down my spine as the oppressive atmosphere closed in around us, suffocating and ominous. With every step we took, the floorboards groaned beneath our weight, their protestations echoing through the empty halls like the anguished cries of tortured souls. Shadows danced along the walls, twisting and contorting in the flickering light of our torches, their movements fluid and unsettling. As we moved deeper into the mansion, the sense of unease that had gripped us outside only intensified. Strange noises echoed through the corridors, a soft whisper here, a distant moan there, as if the very walls themselves were alive with unseen secrets. Goosebumps prickled along my arms, and a knot of fear tightened in my stomach as we pressed onward. Suddenly, Mike stumbled over something on the ground, his flashlight illuminating a pile of dusty artifacts strewn across the floor. We gathered around, our hearts racing with anticipation as we examined the relics of a bygone era. Cracked portraits adorned the walls, their faded faces staring out at us with hollow eyes, while tattered curtains billowed in the drafty breeze. In the dim light, we discovered signs of human activity. A half-empty bottle of whiskey, a discarded cigarette butt, indications that we were not alone in the mansion. The realization sent a chill down my spine as I realized that there were forces at work here beyond our understanding. And as we delved deeper into the mysteries of Holloway Mansion, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were being watched. As minutes stretched into hours within the mansion's depths, the air grew thick with a palpable sense of unease, like a suffocating fog that clung to our skin. Whispers drifted through the corridors, their voices faint and indistinct, yet chilling to the bone. I strained to make out their words, but they remained elusive, as if taunting us with their hidden truths. With each passing moment, the mansion seemed to come alive with a sinister energy, as if the very walls pulsed with a malevolent force. Strange phenomena manifested around us, a sudden drop in temperature that left us shivering, objects moving of their own accord, doors slamming shut with a deafening finality. But it was the voices that haunted us the most, their whispers growing louder and more insistent with each passing hour. At times they sounded like the soft murmur of a gentle breeze, while at others they rose to a crescendo of anguished cries and desperate pleas for release. As we explored further into the mansion's labyrinthine corridors, our senses were assailed by a barrage of disturbing sights and sounds. Faces materialized in the darkness, their features contorted in silent screams of agony, only to vanish moments later into the shadows. The feeling of being watched intensified, a cold dread settling in the pit of my stomach as unseen eyes bore into our souls. No corner of the mansion was spared from the onslaught of supernatural activity, as if the spirits that dwelled within its walls reveled in tormenting us. And as the night wore on, I couldn't shake the feeling that we were nothing more than pawns in a twisted game played by forces beyond our comprehension. As tension hung thick in the air, our nerves on edge, we ventured deeper into the mansion's labyrinthine halls, each step heavier than the last. The oppressive darkness seemed to press in around us, suffocating and dense, as if the very air had turned to lead. And then, in the flickering glow of our flashlights, it appeared. A figure, pale and ethereal, standing before us with eyes that burned with a fierce intensity. My heart leapt into my throat as I beheld the apparition, its form shifting and shimmering like smoke in the wind. It seemed to radiate a sense of malevolence, a darkness that clawed at the edges of my consciousness, threatening to consume me whole. I could feel its gaze boring into me, penetrating to the very core of my being, and I knew in that moment that we were in the presence of something beyond our understanding. The figure spoke, its voice a hollow whisper that sent shivers down my spine. It spoke of pain and suffering, of lives lost and souls trapped in eternal torment. And as its words washed over us, I felt a chill settle over my soul, as if I stood on the precipice of an abyss from which there could be no return. Desperation clawed at my chest as I searched for a means of escape, but the mansion seemed to twist and contort around me, its corridors shifting and changing like a living, breathing entity. The figure drew closer, its form flickering in and out of existence, until it stood before us, a mere whisper of the horrors that lurked within the mansion's depths. In that moment, I knew that we were utterly powerless against the forces that held sway over us. We were at the mercy of the supernatural, our fates hanging in the balance as we stared into the abyss. And as the figure loomed over us, its presence casting a pall of darkness over our souls, I knew that our ordeal was far from over. With terror gripping our hearts like icy claws, we stumbled and tripped over each other in a frantic bid to escape the clutches of the mansion's malevolent presence. The once familiar corridors twisted and morphed around us, disorienting and confusing our senses as we fought to find our way back to the safety of the outside world. Each breath burned in my lungs as I ran, my heart pounding in my chest like a drumbeat of dread. The air grew thick with the stench of decay, choking and oppressive, as if the very walls of the mansion conspired to keep us trapped within its grasp. At last we burst through the doors of the mansion, our bodies battered and bruised, our minds reeling from the horrors we had witnessed within its walls. The cool night air washed over us like a balm, a welcome reprieve from the suffocating darkness of the mansion's interior. But even as we fled into the safety of the night, I knew that we would never truly escape the ghosts that haunted us. The memories of that fateful encounter would linger with us, haunting our dreams and casting a shadow over our waking hours. Physically, we bore the scars of our ordeal. bruises and scratches that served as grim reminders of the dangers we had faced. But it was the emotional wounds that cut the deepest, leaving us scarred and broken in ways that no bandage could ever hope to heal. As we made our way back to civilization, I couldn't help but wonder what horrors still lurked within the depths of the Holloway mansion, waiting patiently for their next unwitting victims. And though we had escaped with our lives intact, I knew that the nightmare was far from over.